you have to think about growing a social account like a business. Your early days, how are you wedging into the market? Who is your audience that can consume this content and find value in it? People on social and human beings in general, right? They only want a couple things. They want to make money, they want to save money, or like they want to get smarter. Like that's it. There is no other thing on social media that really works, right? Make money, save money, make me smarter. Like that is primarily what people come from. You can sprinkle some entertainment, but that's what's going to drive your growth.
Yossi, my man, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Chris, it's good to be here again.
For anybody listening, this is the second time I've recorded, but the first time I did it, you were not Yossi yet. You were still just car dealership guy. And it was funny preparing for that one because you were like, I don't know if I can show my face. I don't know this. So it was like we were arranging this whole conversation, and now we just get to talk like brothers. I love it.
Yeah. And I remember we were telling Johnny, hey, Johnny, can you mess with the voice a little bit? I don't want to dox myself. So Johnny had started playing with the voice afterwards, but hey, it's funny how things change.
It's so funny. And while you're saying doxing the voice, the comment you made in one of our notes, most people thought you were the CEO of Carvana at first. Like that was the general consensus.
Yeah, and I took that as a compliment, because hey, he has access to tons of information. And I came out swinging in this online, social media world, sharing things that I was, exposed to in very intimate forums. Of course, I did it, politely. I didn't, share any like people's confidential information, but I just had access to stories that are very interesting about, growth stories and whatnot in automotive. So, people really found it interesting. And we'll get into about, my background in the online car world, but that was what lended me just a lot of insight into that market.
So for listeners, we are going to spend the meat of this talking about what you're doing today. But I said to set the tone for what you're doing with Car Dealership Guy. We would not be doing the audience a service by giving them a little more history of how you came up. And so maybe just give us some how you came up in the industry, and then touch on the business that you were running before you started CDG.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and how I came up and how I came down, I think it's really, really an important part of the story. I'll take you back, and I'll keep it sort of brief, going way back. But my story started here in Northeast Philly. Father had a small, like 10-car used car lot. As a teen, as a teen going to the car lot, and it was a thing, right? You want to see dad, like you go to work. That was just, what needed to be done. Family was very, needed to do what we needed. We needed to do what we, did to make ends meet. And at the time that was, the right thing for the family. So spent a lot of time at the car lot growing up, just an independent used car lot. Around 2014, I was doing my undergrad, and I started getting very involved in the business. I realized that, I couldn't really leave too much at this point. The business started to rely on me in certain aspects. I was very involved, with the website, the marketing, and the whole digital side of the business. And I said to myself, I was a finance student, but I said to myself, you know what? Like I'm going to stick around a little bit more, help my father grow this business, supporting the family. Then I'll move on and get a real job, right? Like that's the thing car people always say, like I'm going to do this until I do that. And so I was on this whole track for going to the corporate world and whatnot. And the car world just kept kind of sucking me in. And so it was around that point, Chris, where I went for an interview at Subaru of America. This was really funny. And Subaru of America is, again, like, right, get a real job, right? I'm a used car guy. I need to get a real job. And this was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, right over the bridge of Philly. And I just remember interviewing there for like a couple hours or so. Like it was a long process. And at the end of the interview, or two things happened, right? First of all, the guy asked me, he's like, what do you do at this like car lot? I was like, and again, I'm young, naive. I'm like, I'm the chief operating officer. Now, I didn't know, right? Like, I didn't know that a COO, like, I didn't know any of these things. I'm like, I run the operations at this point. I'm the COO. And so this guy looks at me and he's like this guy's like, who are you bullshitting? Well, needless to say, we figured that out. I explained it. But then I remember at the end of the interview, he gives me he's like, okay, well, here's the next step. He's like, and this is what the role entails. You're going to be making PowerPoints. And the second I saw that, I said, holy shit. I said, I am not built for this. Like, maybe, just maybe, this car business, there's something for me to do. And I stuck around and, we kept building the traditional family business.
All right, two things. One is just funny. It's Girdley always posts that photo of a Subaru that says, if your husband's driving one of these, he's definitely not having an affair on you. Really quick on the 10 car used car lot, just really quick, like, can anybody start one of those, or is like, what are the barriers to entry to buying a corner and putting 10 cars on it?
No barriers to entry, my friend. You see, that is why this car business, it just attracts entrepreneurs, because people that don't have opportunity elsewhere, or maybe they're not educated formally or whatnot, right? You can make it in the car business. You just need to be, a grinder, a hustler, right? You have to be willing to put in very long hours, right? You're working retail, so that has its own set of challenges. And in the car business, there's one rule. There's one cardinal rule, and that is, it's not. It's really the way you make your money is where you save, right? You could equate that to real estate, where it's how you buy, but it's really about where can you save, right? Because when you're working in a 5% net margin business, right, you don't have room for error. And so if you're extremely scrappy, resourceful, a hard worker, willing to put in the hours, you can absolutely make millions in the car business, but you have to be patient. It's going to take you, a decade, 5 to 10 years maybe, of just, doing it consistently and continuing to up level.
Okay. And then one last quick question with the big dealerships, and I could be wrong a little bit, but I have a few friends that own the big ones and we've talked, you hear like, you hardly make any money on the car. You make it all on the service, the aftermarket accessories, the warranties. Like when you have a big dealership, you can offer all this. When you only have 10 cars and like probably a little office, how do you make money on that business? Is it a different revenue model or a different income model than the big dealerships?
Yeah, so different dealers have different types of revenue models slightly, right? So we're all selling cars, we're all selling added products to these cars, right? Meaning warranties and whatnot. But when you're a small dealer, you are making money on the car. You have no choice. Like you have to cherry pick these like very specific cars, and you have to make money on them. As you scale, you can get a little bit more creative and be a bit more competitive. So on my podcast, which the Car Dealership Guy podcast, I just interviewed someone where he sells 300 cars a month out of each store that he has. He has 3 stores, and he loses or borderline loses on every single car on the actual vehicle. But that is totally his business model, because he just wants to sell the back end, the warranty, the gap insurance, tire and wheel protection. And so if he sells that to 70% of his consumers, right? Well, he just made a ton of money, even though he lost on the vehicle itself. And because he's so competitive on the vehicle, he's able to attract so many consumers and do such high volume.
He sells cars as a front for his warranty business, something like to that degree. All right. You go to Subaru, you're disenchanted. You go back to your job as COO at the family business, but you didn't stay there long. You eventually had an idea to raise venture funding around an idea in the industry. Will you take it from there?
Of course. So, 2018, right? 4 years later, the business has grown. We're doing like close to $30 million a year in sales. We're 2,000 units, netting probably at this point, like close to $2 million a year, right? Again, starting from nothing. So it was really like great business. Me, my father, some other family members involved as well. And for me, again, I always had this just challenge where I didn't feel, I felt like I could do more. I didn't feel like, being just a used car lot and, one store. I wanted to grow. And I didn't know how that growth was going to come, right? Because my father, at the time he was in his like mid 50s, we sort of had different points in our life, and, we're aiming for different goals. And so I was really asking myself, what are the best opportunities in front of me where I can truly grow and take this business to the next level? And if you remember to 2018, Well, and you might not notice because you're not close to the car business, but that was a time where online car buying really started taking off because Carvana had just gone public. Now, online car buying has been around for decades, since like the early 2000s, eBay Motors, but it became very mainstream. Technology was improving, and Carvana had gone public at like I don't know, like a couple $100 million valuation. It was nascent, but it was definitely something that was talk of the town. So I sat there one day and I said, why can't we build a better mousetrap, right? And the insight that led to that was that I started realizing that most of my customers were coming onto my lot to purchase a vehicle that wasn't even physically present on my lot, right? So let me give you a little bit more context here. We were a subprime dealer, meaning we primarily served customers that were under our 650 credit score. The subprime customer, when they're buying a vehicle, right, they're not shopping for a car, they're shopping for financing. They're asking, who can get me approved? Where can I get the lowest monthly payment, et cetera, et cetera. And it was crazy to me that we had like, I don't know, 50 cars on the lot at this point, but then we had like 150 cars in some side lot, like a couple miles away. People would come and they say, hey, I need to buy a car. We would bring a car from this side lot. They would fall in love with it. Great. Boom. I'm buying it. And so all that led me to saying, okay, why do we even need a car lot if people are anyways buying these cars that are not here? Right? It's like, why can't we just do this online? And then coupled with kind of what was happening in the market, Carvana, technology, I said, I want to build a better way to buy a car. And so I did something very unconventional that, you know, was definitely like, very crazy at the time, which is I said, we're going to build an online auto retailer. And very quickly I realized that that was a very, very big undertaking, which brought me to the next level, which is venture capital. So it's 2018 and I start developing this idea and it's, we're developing all the technology in-house about selling cars online, right? Out of my little office in this used car lot. Our managers and stuff are like, look, what is this? What is he doing? Like, they're like, why is he always in his office? But long story short, I realized that this was a very audacious opportunity and we would just need more capital. And so, in the span of 6 months, I literally I built a plan, we built a MVP. I, built a very, very shitty budget that was very, not very thorough and went out to raise venture capital. And I said, we're going to raise capital and we're going to go build this crazy way to buy a car. At the end of 2018, we landed an investor. It was a really very rough process, especially, I didn't know anything about this world. I'd never raised a dime in my life. And to go out and kind of seek investors, it was definitely a weird phenomenon. But I think having the pedigree from the dealership and when investors saw a real business that was there was something working here, that gave them a lot of confidence. And ultimately, that was in the end of 2018, we landed our first $5 million Series A of funding to go build this online auto retailer. And so that was really the entrance into building what was called Gettacar. We named it Gettacar, which was meant to be a completely online car buying service.
And how was it going to be different from Carvana, or was it not really?
So at the time when we first launched, we were really focused on subprime consumers. And so Carvana was, at that time, was still very much focused on targeting consumers that were they were always focused on subprime, but they were also, trying to go a bit upstream and, offer a bit of a better vehicle. They would not buy cars with damages in the Carfax and whatnot. And we viewed that as an opportunity. We said, wait, if they're not buying these cars, if they're trying to target these people, if they're competing on certain angles on price and stuff like that, right? They're going after a different customer. Why can't we do this after a different type of customer? Oh, and by the way, the used car market is extremely fragmented. At the time, no single player owned more than like 2%, right? CarMax was at 2%. And, everything else was really dispersed between 40,000 plus dealers. And so we said, why not us, right? If we can offer a superior service, arguably do it better in the northeastern part of the United States, which is where we launched, why can't we build a better online auto retailer? That was the thesis behind it.
Maybe just spend a little bit of time. So you kind of grow it, but it didn't end up being the thing. Maybe take us to like the later days and where you kind of saw the writing on the wall that maybe this wasn't going to be the business.
Yeah. So, at around that time, 2019, I mean, things we were pushing. I was, at the time I was 25 years old, no kids, had a girlfriend, but not a wife yet. And it was just go time. I did something that was, I guess, smart or stupid at the time, but it ended up working out. I personally guaranteed all of our inventory because no lender wanted to, offer us floor plan financing to buy inventory to scale. And so I put it all in my name, and it ended up working out. So thank God for that. Or that part worked out. But nonetheless, I mean, I said, look, we're going to rush and we're going to build this company. And so, Chris, for the next 3.5 years, we grew to nearly at our peak 2021, we closed the year at $83 million in sales. We raised, $55 million of capital. So I raised that. That was all just, VC investors, great investors that really believed in us and believed in the vision. And that took us to, 2021, which really was really our peak year. As you remember, like money sloshing everywhere, interest rates are, nothing. And it was mayhem. I mean, people were buying cars left and right, but, we started running into some challenges. I remember around, I want to say the specific month that we peaked was probably mid July of 2021. And after that, things got really tough. And I'll break this down because, there's a couple elements here that were really pivotal in the company's history. But first of all, growth started slowing for us significantly. Certain months we were going backwards. We were scaling so quickly that it was really, I think we underestimated just the operational undertaking of building a vertically integrated online auto retailer, right? Let me explain that. When you're a car dealer, right, as we had our own reconditioning centers, we had our own logistics, we were turning wrenches, we were, putting cars in the body shop, painting cars. I mean, we were doing everything. We set all this up from scratch. And it became extremely complicated as we were scaling quickly. And we had, investors obviously armed us with capital. We had put together a very aggressive plan, right? At the time, startups were growth at all costs. And things just got very, very difficult. And around mid to late of 2021, we entered an M&A process. There was a online publicly traded technology company that was looking to, considering getting into online auto retail, and they took notice of us. And we spent, like 3, 4, 5 months, I want to say, with a really intimate potential M&A process. And eventually, after all these months went by, and I'm sure some people can resonate with this, anyone that's been through, these processes, but they're very difficult. And, you really can't count, you really can't count your chickens until the eggs hatch, or however you say that. But the point being, is it looked pretty promising, didn't end up working out. Deal fell through, right? This was around November of 21. And that was the moment where we sort of hit an oh shit moment. We said, wow, like it's real. Like we're not going to get bailed out. We have to figure this out. And we just had to start cutting costs. And I would tell you, Chris, that was pretty much the beginning of, a road to nowhere positive, really. It was a rough 1.5 years after that, where we just spent, cutting costs, laying off. We tried to pivot. We tried to pivot to private equity. We tried to downsize. We tried to acquire dealerships that are profitable where we could, infuse them with our technology that we had built in-house and improve their economics. But at the end of the day, we weren't able to raise enough capital by this point, right? The market had shifted, rates were starting to rise, and we just weren't best equipped to continue executing on this vision. And so that was really the story that brought me into Car Dealership Guy. But this was the journey, because I was on this aggressive plan and we were building, and we were already talking, to bankers about maybe doing an IPO in 2 years and a SPAC. And within 6 months, we were, on backpedaling. And within 6 months after that, our investors were writing us down nearly to zero. And so it was a very, very brutal couple years with tons of lessons, but it was just a, crazy roller coaster ride.
I have so much respect for you telling that story. I wrote like 2 notes. Personal guarantee. Golly, if you have not personally guaranteed something, are you really even an entrepreneur? I think I've heard that. And then push. Anybody that's listening to this, you've become one of my really good friends that I've met online. We've obviously spent time offline together. And you were just mentioning pushing. And I was actually talking to David Sinra the other day about you. And he was like, tell me about Yossi. I was like, David, you're very passionate. If there's one person I know that might be equally as passionate, it's Yossi. So I can only imagine when you had venture capital and it was go mode, how fast you were going. But it's your superpower. All right, so you decide to wind down, and we could spend the whole episode on just that lesson. But I think what's really important is what came out of it. And when we met the first time, you kind of were telling me this was going on. When we first met, again, you weren't public yet. We had just gotten to know each other, but you're like, I have this company. I don't know if it's going to work out, but you had basically, maybe in your spare time, or maybe it was therapy for you, started a Twitter account to start releasing some energy. Maybe just start there. Like, what was the initial impetus to start doing it? And obviously we'll talk about what's transpired.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one more important thing, but this was Gettacar before Cardio Strike. Gettacar was not just another company for me. Gettacar was something that I sucked my entire family into, right? Like I would, in hindsight, I was crazy for doing this, and it brought a lot of pain because when we were, pivoting it, trying to downsize, get to profitability, remember, like I was dragging along. I had a father that was involved in the business, even post venture capital. I mean, they had roles in the company. They had sentimental value. I mean, it was really difficult. And I constantly wrestled with myself because I had to, deliver value for shareholders, right? Stay very objective. But it definitely added and just another layer of weight on me, knowing that I'm letting down, my family, my father, or so it felt at the time. Needless to say, I mean, I had shareholders that believed in me. I believed in myself. I mean, I sold them a story and I couldn't deliver on that. And it was a really difficult moment for me going through all that, especially when, I mean, I'm telling you, investors put a lot of money and faith in me. And so just that experience, I'm sure there's always people going through this. And I think that experience is a very eye-opening experience because you really realize, who wants to support you throughout those times, it's when you go through that really tough time where the investors and the people around you can really tell their true character. Until today, Chris, I'll tell you that I'll tell you something I've never shared this before, but I actually returned capital to investors, right? And what I mean by I haven't shared this before is like I didn't run the company to the ground. Like after we knew that the company was not going to be a success, I could have kept going but like we didn't want to do that, right? We wanted to we didn't want to throw good money after bad, basically. And so when it got to that point, we arranged a structure where we could actually return millions of dollars to our investors that were remaining on the balance sheet. And like I felt like that was the right thing to do, and instead of just continuing to try to grow something that we just weren't best positioned to do. But till today, I mean, there's just you can see the character of certain investors that have maybe after that even responded. Some people never responded again. I mean, everyone really reacted in different ways. Some people have been super supportive. And I just think that, Chris, life is long. And, we're all in this business world, right? We're all trying to make things happen. And it's really a test of people's character when you go through these type of moments, which I'm just sharing that because I think it's really important to know, who you partner with as much as possible, who you're working with, and how will they behave in the day when things are not going well and everything is not, roses and butterflies. I wanted to kind of cap off the Gettacar saga because it was just a brutal, year and a half, 2 years of winding down and discovering who really supports you, who even, gives an ounce of shit of, that, you're going to do things the right way and versus who doesn't. So.
I have a ton of respect for sharing that. On that note, do you think the idea is still valid? Do you think there is a room in the market for that vision that you had, or it's just not an economically viable model?
I think it's viable, but I think you need to have billions of dollars. I don't think tens of millions is enough. I think it's a capital war. I think it's who can throw more money at the problem. And the reason I say that is because to do it well in a 5% margin business, you need to do it well in a 5% margin business, you need to have a vertically integrated infrastructure. And to build out reconditioning centers, to build out your technology, to own a bank that can lend to your consumers, like all these things take, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I think that the biggest miscalculation for us was not realizing that we would need a lot more money than we would ever have access to. And also to do it at a very brisk pace, right? You're extremely disadvantaged if you're not starting with a massive springboard like Carvana did with Drive Time, which was $1 billion auto retailer. Meaning, if you want to grow really quickly and dominate the market and you leverage processes and systems from other businesses, you're just going to be, at a big advantage in the market. So the opportunity exists. You need a ton of money. You need to have, the domain expertise. Although I will say that, there's some players that are super well entrenched already in the space. And I would definitely not want to compete against them again in the just auto retail. So
some things you can only learn by going through it. Sometimes you got to get punched in the mouth to learn the lesson.
Yeah, I call it the 4.5 year, $50 million lesson. It was very, very brutal near the end. But overall, I mean, invaluable experience. So, and you asked me about car dealership guys. So I'm happy to transition to what happened there because that was an accident as well.
Well, and I think it beautifully sets up for anybody that's going through something bad. Oftentimes what's on the other side of a bad situation is the great thing because you're coming out of something with a ton of learning lessons and it's reshaped you. And so I've seen that happen in my own life, obviously heard it here, but you hear it often. Somebody's biggest swing is usually right after when they get a little bit of a nosebleed. Okay, so the business, like, when did you start it? I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, look, car dealership guy was a Twitter account that I initially launched in December of 21. Now remember, layoff started at Gettacar October of 21. 60 days in, I'm already like with my tongue on the floor. I flew, over the Atlantic. We had an office overseas. I had to go lay off a bunch of engineers and stuff. I was there for 48 hours, sitting in my hotel room, like looking at the ceiling. I'm like, fuck, this sucks. I mean, next day I start laying off people. I have people crying on my shoulder. It's just never fun, right? Anyone that's been through that, it's never fun. Anyways, I get back and, it is just I call this like a non-creative 2 months, meaning as I've learned more about myself and I've kind of discovered what drives me, I'm very creative. I get drive from just creativity, doing things, differently every day. And, we really entered as like, for me, at least personally, it was like a dark moment where I just felt like, I told you we were talking about like PE, pivoting, this, downsizing, very like financial engineering, cutting expenses. I mean, extremely mundane, dull, and like non-creative tasks, or at least it felt like to me. And so I'm sitting in bed one night, and I was always a really big consumer on Twitter, X, the app, right? Like, just always loved reading and stuff. And I see a real estate account. It wasn't yours, but it very well. I did follow you at the time, by the way, so I'll tell you that one. But I saw a good friend, strip mall guy, saw his account. And I'd seen it for a couple of times, but it kind of hit me. And I said, what if I just launch one of these accounts and just like start sharing just some stuff, just have fun with it. It was never meant to be anything. It was just it was just like a little anonymous account. And so I said, you know what, let me do this. And so I remember super, super vividly, I was, because we had just moved to a new house at the time. And so I was sitting on the other side of the bed that I am today, but I was sitting on the left side of the bed and I make this account and I just start tweeting. And Chris, like this was unbelievable because within like a couple of days, I had amassed, I want to say like a couple thousand followers, and I was blown away. Right? Here I am, this like lifelong car guy, been 13 years in the car business, went from a traditional used car dealership to a, 80, 100, $200 million online auto retailer, venture backed, right? Like completely different worlds. And I just said, what if I just share my insight and experiences? And so I just went all in. And that was by what I mean by all in is I just started tweeting my butt off. And I had no vision, I had no intent yet. There was nothing meant to be behind it. It was just, hey, this is fun. It's giving me energy, right? In light of these days that are very dark and grim for me. And so let me just keep doing this. And I just kept tweeting.
As you look in hindsight and really just thinking about like what you said, you were kind of doing it with no strategy. And I think most people listening that there's some accounts you can tell that have a strategy, but I think more people are surprised than not that they're really great accounts. They're just kind of letting it flow from the heart. As you just look back at that, what were you doing really right at the time that maybe you didn't know you were doing right? Were you just sharing things that nobody else in the industry was talking about, or what?
Couple things to note there, and I'll kind of jump into each one separately. First of all, today we have a ton of strategy. Car dealership guy today, car dealership guy media. I actually launched, a formal media company for this about 7-8 months ago. We're a small team. We're 4 individuals, a couple, great freelancers we work with. I mean, we're a team today, but today there's a ton of strategy, and we're much more structured. But I'll get into that later. First of all, when I started, I think what I realized was that the market rewards what I call asymmetrical insight, right? Like what's scarce in our social world, in our market, is insight from real practitioners, people that are, have done it, are real, have done the thing. They're not just posers trying to kind of, create some content, but people that have really grown a business or built something with their hands, gotten their hands dirty. And so for me, what really struck with people was that I was offering that real insight. Now, it was very raw. It was very crude. Like, I didn't yet know how to write copy the best. I used some emojis, which I later realized is cheapens your brand. I used a bunch of capital letter. Like, I didn't really know yet how to do the whole copy work and how to, what's the best way to write content? What aligns with my brand? How do I want to be perceived? Blah, blah, blah. We'll get into that. But for me, early on, what struck, Chris, was simply sharing scarce insight, sharing true, authentic stuff that I had experienced on the ground floor. And just as importantly, interacting with the people that started interacting with me. And so I wasn't just putting insight, kind of lacking off. I mean, I was really engaging with people early on. And I think that was the foray into enabling me to build a community, because I really, for me, it was a true hobby early on that I really, really enjoyed. And I was very passionate about it and well invested into it.
There's that passion again, showing back up. All right. I kind of want to talk about, like, we can call this critical inflection points along the way. So maybe the first would be, all right, started tweeting. Okay, this is landing. This is resonating. Didn't have a strategy. You were using emojis. What was like the next inflection point along the way where you were kind of like, I have something here. Don't know what to do with it. Was it Elon Musk retweeting you? Was there some new moment that was like, okay, we're going to double down on this hobby of mine?
There have been content inflection points, and there have been like truly just tactical growth inflection points. And I'll explain the difference. And again, this is all stuff that it's funny you're asking me, because it's all been in my head. I've just never talked about it. So it's a really good question.
Well, we're like brothers from another mother. So this is natural that I'm going to ask the right question.
Yeah. No, it's going to be fun talking about this, because it is interesting. So first of all, let's talk about the content inflection points, right? Today I have, between all my platforms, around 500,000 followers or so. Twitter, I have like 460,000, right? When I started, I would tell you that initially I was very consumer focused, meaning I shared insights that primarily benefited consumers or consumers were interested in. You have to think about growing a social account like a business, right? Your early days, how are you wedging into the market, right? Who is your audience that can consume this content and find value in it, right? People on social and human beings in general, right? They only want a couple things. They want to make money, they want to save money, or like they want to get smarter. Like, that's it. There is no other thing on social media that really works, right? Make money, save money, make me smarter. Like, that is primarily what people come from. You can sprinkle some entertainment, but that's what's going to drive your growth. And so what I had realized early on, and I didn't know how to put words behind this yet, but I sort of intrinsically realized that that's what people wanted, and that my audience was consumers, right? Because dealers had not yet found me. They didn't yet know who I am, right? And we'll get into that, because today that's my biggest audience. But for me, I said, okay, There's consumers here, people that will one day buy a car, have bought a car, maybe need to sell a car, who knows what, right? Let me just grow a following. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but it's fun. I'm enjoying it. And who knows what happens once I have 1,000, 2,000, maybe 10,000 followers. And so I would tell you that the first like 20, 30,000 followers I gained was strictly through consumer insight, right? Now, once I hit that inflection point, I started realizing that there's another big pocket audience on Twitter, and that was the financial world. I realized that, investors, analysts, hedge funds, I mean, I realized that, these firms are all lurking on this app and they all are looking for, that scarce insight. And so as I consciously started realizing this, and the only way I realized this was by seeing who's engaging with my content, I said, I said, let me share a bit more insight about the general markets. How, where are prices heading? What's happening? What am I seeing on the ground floor? Because that might resonate with a bigger audience, right? And so started doing that. I would tell you around 30 to 40,000 followers. I really went deep into, I wouldn't say I shifted from consumer, but I started supplementing like market insight, right? And then from there, I would say around 100, 120,000, that was when I really started becoming mainstream. And at that point, it was clear that, the broader market was taking notice, right? People like, the everyday person that maybe is not even in the market, but just is curious about the car business started taking notice. And that brought me to my next inflection point, which was in early 2022 when Elon Musk retweeted me. And again, we have to set some context here, right? Early 2022 or maybe late 2021, the car business early 2022. The car business at the time is starting to shift. I'm mixing up my dates, but you'll bear with me with the story here. The car business is starting to shift. I speak with my GM at one of our stores, and he tells me the story about banks that are behaving inappropriately or whatever you want to call it. I mean, approving some customers that should not be approved for lending. Long story short, I wrote a thread about it. I tweeted it. Now, at the time, Elon hadn't yet purchased Twitter, and he was tweeting, very, very rarely. Like a tweet from Elon at the time was very impactful, right? It was a time when a retweet from him or a tweet or something, you were reaching lots of people and you were able to talk to the town. So I put out this thread, and Elon comments on it, right? And it went ballistic. I mean, I think I went from like 110,000 followers to 160 or so, or something like that, within like 2 days. It was unbelievable. Kathy Wood, the big investor, retweeted it. But what I just explained to you there, like those were the key inflection points in my story, where after that, it was just, kind of, turn and earn, right? Just keep putting out the content, keep putting in the reps, and the platform kept on growing. But those were the real critical points, which, I sort of thought about the content. They served as inflection points and allowed me to scale the brand.
Was that a lot of you being boots on the ground in the industry, your insights, or were you, at that point, were people also going to you and sharing things that maybe knowing that you had the distribution, like, hey, this is something you should put out?
Yeah. So early on, it was all the content came from me, right? And then the crazy part was that, within a year, the table turned where most of my content was user generated content. And so the beauty of this platform with Car Dealership Guy, which soon we'll get into like the business side of things today, but it's that, I'm sort of, my goal is to really build this, I call it a premier destination of insights. And the craziest part is that I am not the originator of these insights, right? Like I am not the first party source anymore where I used to be. Today, I serve more as like the nucleus, right? I am the center of it all. And I have people feeding me. I mean, hundreds of people. And Chris, we're not talking about like, just salespeople. And I mean, we're talking about dealer principals. We're talking about executives, CEOs. I mean, people feeding me information, right? And I am sort of serving as this like filtering mechanism where I get to make sense of it using my experience and sharing it with the world. And so I would tell you about a year after Car Dealership Guy was already operating, the game had already shifted, and I was primarily, not completely, but primarily, leveraging user generated content, insights, data. Now, to be very clear, like I'm still writing the content, right? I was still crafting it all, but the data ultimately was no longer just me, hey, what did I sell this week? What did I see at the auction last week? It was, let me grab this insight from this auction executive that has 50 auctions under their belt, or let me go to this dealer that has 70 stores or 50 stores in this, like, you know what I'm saying? It allowed me to really leverage bigger samples of data and anecdotes, and then combine them with my insight and expertise to share with the world.
Yeah, when I've been with you, there's been multiple times where you've kind of been like, I don't know if you were the one breaking the story, but you were so excited because you had just gotten some tidbit of information that you might be the first to share. And I would ask you, like, where are you getting this? And you'd be like, you would have the top of the auto world wants this out. So, I've never had an anonymous account, but when I think about the things I would tweet if people didn't know it was me, there's a benefit to having a personal account, but there's so much more you could share anonymously. God, that has to be so valuable. Okay.
And I'll tell you that, like, car dealership guy would not have worked if it wasn't anonymous. It just wouldn't. I would not have been I wouldn't have had the liberty, or I wouldn't have felt as comfortable sharing certain things. People judge me by my content and by my insight and by my intellect and by my experience, right? I was not judged by who I am, my background, and for what it's worth, right? Like, I've done some things, so it's it's not like I'm a 19-year-old intern sitting in a college classroom, but still, I think that being an anonymous figure, it's truly an incredible tool that the internet has just enabled us to do to share this insight where you can really be candid and open. And today it's a different game. I mean, the brand today is scaled. It's the credibility's there. I've definitely like the way I tweet, the way I talk. I mean, things have changed, right? I've grown, I've learned, I've improved. But just getting it off the ground, I mean, there's no way it would have worked if it wasn't a fully anonymous account.
Okay. When did you decide this is what I'm going to do full time? I'm actually going to make this my next bit of work.
So it was in April 2023. I launched a podcast, right? Which the classic line, I launched a podcast. But again, it goes back to me, right? Like, I needed to keep my brain working. I was still CEO of Gettacar, and I just needed to do something that was mentally stimulating and interesting and fun and creative. And so I launched this podcast. I was like, let me just share some insight. One day I sat down and recorded myself doing a monologue, edited it with GarageBand. I mean, it's just really, really kind of hobbyist at home, just having some fun. Over the preceding 3 to 4 months, the podcast exploded in a good way, right? It grew. It was going viral. I brought some. I had changed it to interview style podcast because I kind of sat there one day and I said, I was like, I can't think of more content. What do I do? And so, how do you solve that problem, right? You bring great guests and they solve your content problem for you. And so I moved to interview style, but the podcast really started going viral within the auto community. And so it was around September 2023 where, for a couple months, I was already having conversations with the board about, we were trying to sell the business, wind down and whatnot at Gettacar. But at that point, I had officially stepped down. And so we had put a plan in place. Someone was taking over my position to do the wind down operations. And in September of 2023, I said, it's go time. Like, I now have this platform, right? I've built this reputation. I haven't really monetized it yet, like very, very immaterially in a small scale. But now it's time where I can really, potentially build a business around it. And the specific business I chose to build was media. Because I said, like, I could build CDG insurance, CDG dealerships, car dealership guy, anything. But to me, just being in the media space, I felt like it was such a missing opportunity for the car market. I said, there is no refreshing, authentic, transparent source of insights for people that truly just want to know what the hell is happening in the car market. Yet, we're coming off the craziest years in this business. People have no idea where prices are at, where is inventory heading, how interest rates, affordability. It's like, it was crazy to me that, we're in the time where people are craving insights into automotive more than ever. Yet I felt like that just wasn't being solved by the broader market or mainstream media channels. And I said, we're going to build a media business that's going to disrupt us.
And to be fair, I'm assuming you probably still think when you talk to these creators that are turning into media businesses, especially in an industry as large as yours, those CDG insurance, CDG dealerships, those might be on the backside of this too, where once your distribution is so big and you are the authoritative brand, you can basically start launching lines. It's almost like the Mr. Beast model or whomever you want. It's really the future. Have you thought about it that way?
Content is your oxygen. And so for me, all right, every day as a creator, what are you doing, right? You're compounding. You're gaining more followers. You're gaining more attention. You're gaining more email subscribers. You're getting more podcast listeners. You're building more credibility. It's not perfectly even because you're also losing some, 100%. But this is why, like, it's really important that when you're building content, you have to know what type of content are you offering. Are you offering content that is easy for people to drop off? Or are you offering something that's sticky and people keep coming back to? And so as I grew my podcast, right, I asked myself a couple of questions. I said, what am I interested in? Right? What type of content is most interesting to me? And what type of content can I really build a business around? Right? Because at the end of the day, right, I don't believe in advice like, oh, just go and, talk like as if you're talking to yourself or no one's listening. No, that's BS in my opinion, because you have to create stuff that the audience will actually listen to and could potentially be a business if you want to be able to do this full time and sustain it as a profitable cash flow positive entity. And so what I realized was that for me to double down on automotive insights specifically geared for the automotive industry, right? Most of my listeners today are in the auto industry or auto adjacent, so like lenders or vendors or whatnot. I have plenty of consumers that listen as well, are tuned into my podcast and whatnot, but still most of my audience is B2B at this point. But what I realize is that B2B always needs insights. And in such a dynamic, fast moving industry like automotive, there's always something new happening. And so I was very confident and I said, I'm going to double down on this and I'm not going to rush to monetize in all these creative ways because I think that, I want to still build the foundation for what this is. I didn't feel like I was mature yet, meaning the company still had a lot of room to grow. And I said, let me just continue. Content is king before anything. And I've done some things since then, and I've launched a couple of things then. I launched a industry job board and a bunch of other things since then, and I'm still working on things. But at the end of the day, when I wake up and go to sleep every single day, content is my baby, and I have to make sure that several pieces of content go out. Whether I have something scheduled for that day, which I don't really do too often, whether my team is clipping some stuff for me, getting some insights for me, whether I'm tweeting off the whim, which I do every single day. I have to do that rain, snow, sleet, or shine. I have the flu. I'm in the hospital. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, you want to build a great business, you have to be, put the repetitions in and just be very obsessive about that content flywheel.
And just to drill down a little more on that. So when you first started, you were just kind of, tweeting into the ether. You were kind of just sharing whatever was coming. And then you kind of said, now that you're at 450,000 followers, there's a little more method to the madness. Obviously, you have a team. But if you had to describe like how content goes out now, is it a certain amount of pieces every day? Is it getting across more channels, TikTok, Instagram? Like, how are you thinking about building that foundation? And then what's kind of the strategy behind it?
As I scaled Car Dealership Guy and I realized, I wanted this to be a real business, I started asking myself, what are all the different types of content I'm posting? And so, I sat with the team and we really just like drilled this down. So, and I'm looking at my screen here. I'll tell you exactly how it works. So today at Car Dealership Guy, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I have like 16 different forms of content, right? This is how we've mapped like my everything I've done. We've mapped it to 16 different forms. And each one of those contents we label with a letter. So like there's an A post, a B post, a C post, a D post, an E post, da, 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 da. You get the point. Now, every single type of content requires a different level of effort and insight. And so as a creator at my scale, remember, like I'm also building a business. I can't be finding every single data point and whatnot, right? It doesn't mean I'm not informing it and I'm not putting the insight behind it and maybe even pressing send in most cases. But there's different types of content that just require different levels of efforts and knowledge and experience. And so when we did this, we basically mapped out my entire kind of, ecosystem into all these letters. And then we asked ourselves, what do I need to do versus what can other people help me? And so, like, for example, like an A post is a short form stat, a short form statistic with no context, which could be like, the top selling cars this year, and it shows you like a list of like, 10 cars. Like that is something that I don't need to do, right? That is a stat that like anyone can do with no context, no insight. And so as an example, that is something that my team today will actually aggregate and post, or I might post it, but like they'll actually do that work, right? I'm just going down the list, right? You have short form stats, long form stats, community engagement posts, user generated content, a CDG self promotion post, a meme, breaking news press releases, best car deals, a podcast post, a podcast teaser. These are all different types of content on my calendar. And so now what we've built at Car Dealership Guy is we've built what we call 4-week sprints. And so every 4 weeks, there's a certain amount of A posts, B posts, C posts, D posts, E posts, da, 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 da. And we map them out on a calendar. And then we're able to know what type of content do we need on what days, right? I set this myself. I decide, what do I want out to the world? Maybe the day before a podcast, I always want a teaser, right? Maybe once a month I want to post, or twice a month I want to post the best deals, right? Maybe 3 times a month I want to post memes, right? And this is how we're able to start better managing and systematizing content creation, right? Because it's otherwise, if you don't build a system, and this is just, we're testing this, it's super nascent, it's very flawed and imperfect still, but this is how we're starting to build that muscle, because we realize that in order for the company to scale and to CDG to be, Car Dealership Guy to be much bigger than just me, right? We have to start, building that muscle.
What's the hardest form of content to create of all the types that you create? Is there one that's super difficult?
I wouldn't say there's difficult, but I would say there's difficult to delegate, right? So there's some stuff that, like, listen, I love creating content. I love interacting with my audience. I'll never delegate everything. I don't want to delegate everything, right? Like I actually enjoy this stuff. Right? So like putting out a long form statistic with insight and context, right? Like that is something that you need a lot of different types of competencies to do that. You need to be able to copyright very well. You need to have an insight into the market. You need to have context, right? So you gotta have experience to know what this even means. You have to put it at a time where it makes sense in the market. Like there's all these different, kind of experiences, and you just have to have a certain level of context that is harder to delegate. And so, that's the type of content that, like me just tweeting about, I just had a conversation with a dealer. Here's what they told me. Here's what this means. Here's the implications this could have on the car business. Like that is me mapping 13, 15 years of car business experience. And it's just a lot harder to delegate. And so I'm not trying to delegate that, right? Like what we're doing here is we're saying we want to build the most premier and largest platform for automotive insights. Let's delegate the 60%, the 70%, the 50% that is stuff that I literally don't need to be doing and is easy to delegate because it doesn't require much insight other than, getting the right data into the market.
Okay. And real quick on podcasts, you said that was a huge inflection point. I know my answer to the question, but if you had to describe from your experience of now running your podcast, basically 6 months or 7 months, to you, what's the value of having a podcast? Why do you think podcasts are so powerful?
So I stole your line. I think you said this, but were you the one that said trust at scale?
Yeah.
Is that you?
But I stole it from somebody, I think.
Fair enough. But like, it's so beautifully stated because when you really simplify it, think about it. When has there ever been a time in the world where you could listen or you could tell a story or what we're doing now and tens of thousands of people listen to that in such an intimate manner? I mean, it's truly fucking incredible, right? Now, for me, it's been 2 things. Number one is I've sort of scratched my own itch, right? When I was a dealer, I had no source for insight. I was wondering, how are dealers making money? Are they, doing this, that model, this method? Yeah. You can join 20 groups, which are like kind of peer groups in the automotive business. But the point being that I felt like, how is there nothing that's just, kind of democratizing this to everyone? And so for starters, like the podcast enabled me to do that because now, it's such a privilege. I get to bring on the biggest, best dealers in the world, the largest stores, the biggest executives, also some of the smaller stores, mom and pop shops that are trying to make ends meet. I mean, everyone in between, and I just get to ask them questions for an hour. I mean, it's unbelievable because you just get to gain so much knowledge in such an intimate forum, and they're thrilled about it because they're getting distribution, they're getting exposure, they're getting their name out there, and the best part for them is that they're not just speaking to one person, they're speaking to thousands. And so I think, I just the way you worded that trust at scale, it just so beautifully stated, and I couldn't agree with it more.
If I were to say to you, why would it be better to get on CDG that maybe has a smaller audience than say go on CNBC and do your typical kind of 10-minute spiel?
At the end of the day, right? You want to go out and you want to deliver a message to the world. Maybe you want to tell your story, right? Like we all want distribution. CNBC actually follows me closely. They're very great people. They've invited it's funny you say, they've invited my podcast guests onto their segment after seeing the podcast. They've told me this. So I actually really like CNBC. But at the end of the day, Chris, like, you go into CNBC or some, channel, maybe it'll, be out there once, maybe it'll get uploaded to YouTube. But at the end of the day, there isn't a face behind that brand, right? There isn't a human. And the podcast, what's so powerful about it is that when I bring someone on the podcast, it's a real, human connection. It's a human to human story. And, I didn't invent the rules of human nature. I don't know why humans gravitate more to humans than brands and things that don't have a face to them. But that's just how life works, right? Like people want to listen to people. People want to listen to authentic conversations. People want to listen to things that are unfiltered, right? And podcasts give you that. The podcasts are not gate kept by anyone. They're permissionless. You're not going through some screening system, some filtering system. I mean, it's truly one of the last platforms that are just completely unbiased. And you have the opportunity to have, a real candid conversation without any agenda or someone, pushing some narrative behind it.
It's trust at scale. I mean, and I think we've built a better filters even in this whole world of way more content. It used to be when it was only mainstream media, you just kind of, maybe you trusted it, maybe you didn't, but it's all you really had to trust. There was no other form. And we're in this world now where I think we're building better radars for what's authentic, what's trustworthy. And not that CNBC isn't trustworthy, but it's what you said. There's no face to it. You know it's scripted. They ask questions in a way that aren't how two people would just ask at a dinner table, kind of like what we're doing right now. So anyway, okay. So you have massive Twitter account. You have leading podcasts in the industry. Let's keep maybe thinking about channels. So I hate to say this. I don't know if you have a newsletter or not, but how are you thinking about more verticals or more channels to get this content out? What matters to you?
Yeah. So we're looking at, I'm constantly asking myself, let's say our ideal customer profile, a car dealership guy, is the car dealer, the senior manager, the automotive executive, right? Like that is who we're targeting with our insights. That is who we're providing, asymmetrical value to, where they're saying, wow, like this is incredible. I can't get this anywhere else. And so what we're doing is today we're reaching about, well, actually, I'll take you to last month because we just did something very big and special, and I'll fast forward to that shortly. But last month we were doing about 60 million impressions a month across all social channels, and the newsletter and the podcast. And so, that was our primary source of insights, and just the mediums we were using: newsletter for written format, the podcast for people that like audio, YouTube as well. Bundle them with the podcast, and then social channels. Now we had an issue. And again, goes back to the vision, right? We want to deliver a lot of insights and just, be the biggest platform for that. And so the challenge we ran into was we said, I'm very comfortable with text and LinkedIn, Twitter. Like these are the platforms that I thrive in. And so we started asking ourselves, how can we deliver more insights? And how can we do this through also Instagram, TikTok, visual platforms where there's, tons of audience, but it's not necessarily what is my best use of my skill set and the current competency we have at the company. And so we launched a talent network, and we worked on this for months, right? But basically what this talent network is we had a lot of automotive influencers reaching out to us for help, and myself, and I just didn't have time to help them. And some of these people were really talented. And so one day I sat there with my team and I said, I said, what if we team up with these influencers, these creators that have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they complement us on a platform perspective, right? Because they're on other platforms. And we exclusively manage their entire business, right? Because creators want to create, or at least most do. And so we went full swing, we went kind of full steam ahead on that. And we spoke with several creators. We spent a couple months, but we just signed our first creator. And what that really means now, Chris, is that basically today and over the last couple of weeks, we've just doubled our reach. And so while we're still primarily social newsletter podcast in terms of media distribution, now that we've signed on our first creator, and I'm happy to share who it is. There'll be, I haven't shared it yet, but happy to share it here. But now that we signed our first creator, who's very big on Instagram and TikTok, it just provides us an opportunity to completely dominate the platforms. He's do over 120 million impressions a month, and again, continue chipping away at the different forms of distribution that exist in the media ecosystem.
And just really quick, how does that individual being on your platform further CDG? Do consumers that are consuming the content see some related link to you, or do you not really care?
Yeah, so there's a lot of plans we have for like cross-pollination and co-branding and whatnot. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, the creator we signed, his name is Russell Richardson, just phenomenal creator, very talented. His Instagram and TikTok handles go by Russ Flips Whips. I'm just so creative. Like I love this kid. And he is, I say kid, I mean, he's an adult, but like he's just so good. But anyways, it's a lot of co-branding, a lot of cross-pollination between the two. I mean, we have a lot of things in plan. We're just kicking off now. But at the end of the day, the value of Car Dealership Guy continues to increase as we're in more places, as more people rely on us for insights, right? That's what we want to be. We want to be your sidekick. We want to be able to inform you. And for us not to have the presence on, or a prominent presence, because we have a presence, but on Instagram, TikTok, and all these platforms is just not okay. And so having someone like Russ now on our platform, expanding the reach of Car Dealership Guy and being able to, serve as his agent and get his deals done, which is a muscle that we have in the company, which is very strong nowadays, is a huge benefit to us because now it allows us to be in more places, serve more people. And by the way, our advertisers that come to work with us, we've just doubled the exposure that they have access to on double the platforms. And so it's almost, if you think about it like in a traditional business, it's almost like M&A, right? Because it's just, if you know how to do M&A well, I mean, you can truly accelerate your growth. And in this case, it's definitely not M&A, but it's partnering with someone that you believe in, who's super talented, who's super smart, who's super creative, who you align on values with. And just overnight, once you get a deal done, allows you to, double your reach on the internet.
Okay. And you answered it, with brand deals, advertising deals. But if somebody signs up to this kind of talent network, what are you're saying you're going to get to do this and we'll do all this. What is this that y'all will do? Brand deals, ad deals, anything else you're doing?
We've had a lot of conversations and we're having a lot of conversations with additional creators, as you can imagine. And the reality is all these deals are very bespoke. Like they're all different. It really depends on the creator and their needs, right? Because you don't want to go to someone and say, hey, let me do this for you. They're like, I don't want that. And so with us, for us, like the foundation, the first starting point is just like, who is talented, who complements us, right? Maybe complements us by being on platforms we're not. Maybe complements us by appealing to an audience segment that we don't appeal to as much. But we first ask ourselves who complements us. And then we say, okay, now that they complement us, let's understand, what are the best ways that we can monetize this creator and work with them to do deals. And so, who are the best brands that we can go out and get these deals? And then all that said and done, we say, okay, Mr. Creator, Mrs. Creator, what do you need our help with, right? Maybe you need me to do your accounting for you in addition to sell your deals. Maybe you need me to help you do production, or maybe you don't need anything. Maybe you just want me to sell your deals and leave you the hell alone. And so I think our spot is not to go to a creator and tell them, hey, this is what you should be. This is how you should be. This is who you should partner with. Like Our job is to work with talented creators that we align on values in the auto space, and potentially beyond. And then ask them, what do you need help with? How can we help you be a better creator? What can we get off your plate? And again, Chris, it goes back to same exact issues I dealt with, right? I was an up and coming creator. I didn't want to deal with all this like logistical headache. It was a pain. I had no sales team yet. I had no production, and I built it, and it was hard, and I hated it, but I did it, right? And I'm still doing it, and now I love it because it's much more of a system than it was early on, and it's still super early. But the point is, I know the pain. I've been there, and I want to help other creators kind of ease that pain and also help them grow.
I love it. All right. The next inflection point might be what you were talking about last month. And there was a series of very popular anonymous accounts that kind of decided maybe y'all did it individually for different reasons, but you had been anonymous for roughly 3 years at that point. You decided to kind of make yourself known, and you did this incredible video, Who the F is Car Dealership Guy. Why did you decide to show who the man was behind the account?
Yeah, so I spent. So again, it goes back to really just thinking like, first principles. So I sat there for months and I said, okay, I started an anonymous account for a reason at the time, which was, I wasn't going to put my stakeholders or risk them in any way. I'm way beyond that now. I'm a legit brand, and I'm building a real business. Plus, 1,000 people probably know who I am. Every guest who's been on my podcast, every advertiser, but I don't control my narrative, right? I realized that I'm getting onto calls with people that are meeting me for the first time, and they're like, wait, you were a dealer? Then you were a venture-backed tech founder? Then that didn't work out and you launched this media company? Like, what? And it really bothered me because I knew that I felt like I was doing a disservice to myself and my story. Like I was going into these conversations like, oh, well, let me explain. It was just really awkward. And so I asked myself very simply, I said, what is the best way that I can tell the world my story at scale and explain who the fuck I really am and why I'm doing this, and do it vulnerably by truly opening up and telling people the truth. And I'm super proud of my story. I mean, I've been through some, crazy experiences, and I wanted that out there. I wanted people to know my failure. Like, I wanted to be that sicko that puts it up front and shows people like, hey, this is what didn't work out. And all roads just led to producing a video. Now, I had never personally produced a video. I'd done some stuff through Gettacar, my prior company, but I got linked up to a really talented producer, video guy, and we just went to bat. And so I spent, like I said, 3.5, 4 months creating this video where, it was incredible. I interviewed my father in it, some of my former coworkers, some of the, biggest dealers in the country. And it was just a home run. I mean, we publicized it on Twitter, February 2nd. I did a live unveiling, as they call it, at a conference in Las Vegas. There was like hundreds of people that attended this. It's on YouTube as well, on my YouTube channel. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, it gave me the opportunity, Chris, to tell my story again at scale and add visuals, which made it even more intimate, even richer, and just explain to people like, this is who I am, the good, the bad. This is how I got here. Here's what I'm doing. Here's my vision. And I can't tell you how much I just recommend this. I mean, I get it. Not everyone's anonymous, but you'd be shocked at how many people are just curious. People want to know, like, who is this person? Why are they doing things? And when you truly put time and effort to producing something intimate, authentic, I mean, today I get onto calls with people and they're like, dude, I feel like I know you. Like, I watched your video, I know your story, and I'm like, amazing. Let's get right into it. Like, it's such a cheat code in life, because just like podcasts are trust at scale, they're permissionless. I mean, it's very similar where now, I mean, I'm so glad I did it. I unveiled. I don't have to at this point, again, the anonymity doesn't serve me anymore, or I didn't need it anymore. I built my credibility. The industry knew who I was. I mean, it was just time. And I mean, thank God it worked out very well.
Dude, it was such a great video. If you're listening to it, go check out his YouTube channel or go to his Twitter account. It's his pinned link. We'll also put it in the show notes, but it was such a great video. It was like 15 minutes, Netflix quality. And maybe one question off of that, Do you think you had to build the credibility and get to you where you were to then launch? Like, do you think, obviously you wouldn't have had the audience that would have seen it, but do you think it would have been a disservice had maybe you started it a year or done that video a year into the account?
100%. 100%. I just think that I needed to wait to be mature for the brand to have very strong credibility. That I mean, by the time I unveiled Chris, I had some of the biggest industry CEOs on my podcast. I mean, some of the most influential people, and that gave me the confidence and allowed me to just say it how it is.
Was there points in time where there were people that were dismissing your credibility? Was that impacting you at all along the way? Or was it all 99% positive, 1% negative?
It was definitely overwhelmingly positive, which truthfully shocked me. I didn't expect that. I would say as I was growing, like there were very few naysayers, and the reason I was able to get that done. And when I say naysayers, I mean people like, oh, like you're bullshitting. It's because everything I wrote about, it got to a point where I started informing it with data, and I sourced my data. And so early on, I had a lot of people like, oh, you're full of shit, you're this. And I still share anecdotes all the time, but I do my best to inform those anecdotes and back them up with data, with reputable sources. And the beautiful thing about data is that it's just a lot tougher to argue with, right? Because it's like, hey, if vehicle supply went up from 2 to 3 million or whatever, like that is a fact, right? Like vehicle supply there's more vehicles on the road. And guess what happens when there's more vehicles on the road? Prices come down. And so I think just, but the fact that I was very data driven, that definitely, minimized the haters. But listen, I will caveat that with one thing. Anytime you're doing something, anytime you're putting stuff out into the world, you're going to have people that hate on you and that try to discredit you. And you just like, it doesn't matter. Like you should listen because sometimes 1 in 10, there's something constructive, but like 9 in 10, it literally doesn't matter. And let me even reframe that even more. You should actually look for those people because that tells you that you're doing something different, right? Like if you don't have those people, just chirping in your ear or whatever, jealous, whatever it may be, then you're probably not doing something that impactful. And so the way I see it today is like, those stages were really just an unlock for me. And knowing that, okay, this is something unique and different, and it's truly changing the game because otherwise people wouldn't be this passionate about, maybe telling me I'm wrong or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's sometimes I'll tweet, like I'll have lunch with a giant in the industry and I'll leave and I'll post something like had lunch with a friend and he told me this. And again, it's mostly all positive, but there's always the few people that are like, you're full of shit or who's your friend and you can't really share who the person is that like, they don't really want anybody to know that they said it. But, that's been my one anecdote on sharing like on the fly stats. And I always caveat it with like, I heard it from my friend rather than me taking credit for the insight. It's just always interesting how people respond to it.
Yeah, but that's a strategy that works.
Yeah, it does. Okay. You've been going full time since September. I mean, we could keep talking on and on about this, but if I were just to give you the like, what is the big vision here? If we sat back down here in 5 years, what will you have accomplished in this business?
Look, I think that I feel like I stumbled onto an opportunity that, as Brett Morgan, who's one of the dealers that was on my documentary said, it's like you're seizing an opportunity that we didn't know we needed, right? Like where Car Dealership Guy is headed is I want to build the largest destination of automotive insights. Think of this as a hub that levels the playing field for dealers and consumers on information access, on insight, on boots on the ground experiences. I am serving Chris in this industry right now. Like I'm growing this, what I call like this collective intelligence of the automotive industry, right? Where people are feeding me information. And the more that I get, it's just self-perpetuating. It makes the brand stronger. It allows me to deliver more insights to arm the market with more knowledge. And so where's this brand going? Well, the way I see it is, we are going to continue, number one, first and foremost, expanding our content. I mean, content, I mentioned this before, content is king, content is king, content is king. And the most important thing for me every day I wake up, I talk to my team, the first thing we talk about is always content, right? Like, what are we working on? How are we making our content every day 1% better? It could be adding B-roll on our sponsors ads on YouTube. It could be improving the SEO on our descriptions. It could be upgrading our thumbnail. I don't know what it is. Every day we have to get 1% better on content, because content is what is going to drive us and continue scaling this business. And then other than that, and expanding the content and growing the content and improving the content, I do want to get into get into more service businesses as well. And so, we're slowly starting to, kind of sniff around, see what are the best opportunities. Recently we launched an industry job board, right? Sounds simple, right? Industry job board. What? You don't understand. I mean, this thing has gone viral. Over 100 of the top automotive brands have already signed up for it. There's over like 150 roles posted. And it's free, right? And again, it's stuff like that it's like, it sounds so simple, but when you think about it, you can only do that if you have a community, right? You need people that need jobs and you need people that have jobs. And it's stuff like that I think there's, that's where the opportunity really lies with Car Dealership Guy, because as we grow our scale, we grow our reach, we're able to be in front of tens of thousands of automotive, just people in the automotive industry. It just creates an opportunity where we can matchmake, we can create, launch businesses, services, products that is just limitless. And so the truth is, Chris, I don't know what we're going to launch yet in a year, 2 years, 6 months even from today. But I can tell you that it's all going to be rooted in a couple things. It's going to be, number one, it's going to drive our mission of making the car market more transparent. Number two, is going to somehow offer more insight and transparent knowledge to the car market. And then number three, it's just going to uplift this industry for dealers and consumers. I really, really believe that, there's no reason, dealers and consumers should be adversaries. I think the reason the dealership has such a, bad stigma is because, again, it's a misalignment of expectations. It's, lack of transparency. And I think that, combining, fixing that alignment and, will ultimately help uplift the entire auto industry for buyers, sellers, and dealers alike.
Did any dealer along the way ever be like, dude, quit sharing this? This has been our secret for 30 years and now it's exposed.
I've had some dealers do that, very, very small numbers. I've had some consumers do that. I would tell you that it's always the extremes. Like only the really extreme dealers and the really extreme consumers are, will hate on if I do something that's a little pro consumer, a little pro dealer, but I don't care. I mean, I know my values, I know my ethos. I want to be objective. I want to be down the middle as much as I can. And so, it's okay. Like some people will do that, they'll live with it.
We are very aligned. I don't know where the Fort podcast or some of the media we've created here will lead, but I just have this feeling that if I stick to it and keep being consistent, the world of opportunities will continue to open up. And as you know, it's like distribution is king. Once you've created that, and you've obviously created it around something that's great, that's why you have it. But once you have it, if you don't screw it up, it's probably the most powerful tool right now in the world. I think it's still so undervalued.
This was my biggest problem at Gettacar. I mean, I couldn't acquire customers at a profitable rate at a certain point. And, it's distribution, right? Like, how do I get my word out there? How do I tell the world about this phenomenal product and service? And distribution is so, so important.
All right. I want to pivot for a little bit. That was incredible. I want to talk just a little bit about the market. And the first thing I would just throw out, this is for my own curiosity. What is Apple dropping their electric vehicle project that they were working on for probably a long time? What does that mean for the market? Or what does that tell you? That Tesla's king? Or?
Well, it's definitely, kudos to Tesla for sticking it through and making it happen. Apple could have acquired them years ago and they didn't pull the trigger. Who knows if that would have worked out or not, but clearly worked out for Tesla. I think it's also a testament to the state of EVs in our market today. I mean, EVs, electric vehicles, for those that don't know, they are selling roughly twice as slow as internal combustion right now. We've kind of hit this obstacle in the road. And the day supply specifically is roughly twice as high on EVs. I mean, you're seeing increasing rebates, increasing deals. So they are actually becoming more attractive deals for consumers. I'll put that out there. But there's no doubt about it that the EV market is just cooling. I mean, the last couple of years were crazy. Every car was selling, like hotcakes off the lots. And in the last year, I mean, you've seen electric vehicle prices drop anywhere between 15 to 50% in some cases, right? Tesla dropped some cars down as much as 50%. And so, I would tell you that, I don't think it's like a secular decline from here. I think that it's actually just like an obstacle in the road. I do think EVs still have a lot of room for growth. Um, they're not for everyone, for sure. And I think the growth is going to slow for the foreseeable future. But I do think EVs still will continue growing. There is adoption is still increasing. Market share is still growing for EVs. And speaking very short term, the deals are getting a lot better. And so again, I'm like a deal hunter, right? Like I look like, okay, I don't care if its car runs on air, on gas, on freaking jelly beans. Like I want to know like what's the best deals in the market. And if you look right today at the state of EVs and you look at like the best lease deals, the best purchase deals, I mean, EVs have really taken over. They're like, 80% of the best deals are EVs. And so if I'm a consumer in the market today, I would absolutely, and again, if I didn't care what car, I just wanted the best deal, I would look at an EV because the prices are seriously declined. And they're just the manufacturers are offering some of the best rebates on them.
Why are they declining?
Demand, my friend. That's the only word. It really is just demand. I mean, there's not enough demand, supply's rising, and cars got to get off the lots. So it really is that simple.
But if they're cheaper and they're better deals, is it something about the, how they work or how far they can go, or it takes too long to charge them? Like if the price is right, why are they dropping so much?
Oh no, so let me caveat that. Like the prices have only started adjusting now. Right. So like they've been behind. So like you're right, like sales will probably rebound a bit now, given that, certain brands are, I would say, on the way to equilibrium. They're not there yet, but they are on the way. I mean, as of like last week, prices declined, a couple of days ago, like prices are declining now. Tesla is the only one that's ahead of the curve. They started declining prices months ago. And so if anything, Tesla is, kind of already on the other side of it. They dropped their prices over the last 12 months significantly, and they kind of already, they took the medicine there. But all the other brands have been slowly, declining over the last couple of months. And so just now, sales for EVs are starting to pick up. And I'm seeing it also anecdotally. I'm seeing, lots of people that would have never considered an EV suddenly pulling out of lots with, BMWs, electric BMWs and, Audis and stuff like that, or Hyundais, because the deals are actually getting a lot better. I mean, I posted the other day, an Audi, someone that bought an Audi in Maryland, they got like $36,000 or so off MSRP on a lease for an EV. I mean, it was an Audi e-tron. They did put down like $8,000, but they still got a crazy discount. And they drove out for like $600 a month on a $110,000 car. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, there are opportunities out there today to take advantage of the cooling EV demand.
All right, we'll bring it home on this one. What, in your opinion, is what's captivating your attention right now in the auto business? Is it something different? What is the most interesting thing right now that maybe that dealers care about, that the B2B or the consumer, in your mind?
Well, look, the auto is still going through just the craziest transition it's probably ever gone through. I mean, we did not lease enough cars over the last 3 years, which means there is a leasing cliff coming up, meaning a lack of lease returns in the next couple of months, which means fewer used cars in the market, which could mess up prices again. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I don't know if prices will go up for used cars, but they may not go down. So there's just so much uncertainty. And so, I love staying close to the data, to the macro, even to the micro, just really seeing what's happening. I think the biggest things I'm seeing is just that people are going back to the fundamentals. The last couple of years, people disrespected the fundamentals. I mean, all rules went out the window. It was mayhem. And salespeople were making 3 times their earnings. Dealers were, I mean, things are going back to normal in the sense that the fundamentals matters again. You need to manage your inventory well again. And customer experience matters. I mean, you really have to, run a tight ship if you want to survive in this environment. The rate environment hasn't been pretty. Dealers they don't own their inventory cash typically. They typically finance that. You're seeing some dealers that are paying, hundreds of thousands per month for inventory, or over 100,000 a month on inventory alone. I mean, it can get really hot and heavy. And so I think where I'm looking at is simply, what are the ways that, how are dealers navigating through these environments? How is it going to impact the market? Where are deals going to pop up for consumers so that I can make sure to keep customers informed? Because guess what? If you're a dealer that has cars on your line of credit and you need to get them off your line of credit, what are you going to do? You're going to offer deals that you maybe otherwise would not, just to get them sold. And so I'm paying attention to all this. And then, other than that, on the really macro level, just to really zoom you out, like, will China start bringing their cars to the US? That's going to cause a lot of disruption. And I think they will, right? I don't know how they're going to do it yet, whether they're coming through Mexico or whatnot. But just talking to smart people that have access to a lot more insight than me, that travel to China to meet with officials. I mean, I think it's happening. It's going to come soon. And I don't know how it's going to impact the US market, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be pretty. And so, we need to brace ourselves for a very dynamic environment, because the market is changing, the game is changing. There's new players on the field, technologies are changing, and I think the next 5 to 10 years are just going to be very monumental in the way they shape the car industry as we know it.
All right, folks, to stay up on the next 5 to 10 years, follow my man Yossi, car dealership guy. Yeah, what you've done is incredible. I'm so excited to keep watching you do it, man. Thanks for joining me today.
I appreciate you, and I've admired you from early on, and you know this because we spoke super early on, before this was anything. And so I think it's just crazy. It's funny how life works and how things change. And I just remember speaking with you and telling you, Chris, like, I don't know if like I can do this, or like, what should I do? And I have my dad and investors and this, and you really just gave such sound advice early on, and super, super appreciate it, man. And so thank you for that. And yes, and if anyone is interested in the auto business, once, Insider Insights, Car Dealership Guy podcast, all platforms, check it out. I have lots of consumers that listen, auto people, lenders, I mean, really all walks of life. And so, yeah, I mean, would love for you for tune in, and I really enjoyed being on this podcast.
I'm rooting for you, my man. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.